Hi everyone, don't be shy to ask us some questions. We are live. I do apologize about the change of appearance, but it's a time traveling thing for me. So can you guys see anything in the discussions?
No, not yet.
No, I don't. Let's see. Oh, I think we got one.
Q&A.
Yeah. So somebody asked, what can brands and suppliers do to support innovation?
Well, I think that's quite different, I guess, Europe and America. So I guess I'll kind of chat a bit more about how it works in Europe, I guess. So here, we can actually talk directly with brands. So there's not a kind of three-tiered system where we have to talk to the supplier. So, for example, I can talk with Jack Daniels, Old Forester, or Woodford Reserve, and go, "Hey, I've got this concept, but I really need this kind of machinery to use. Would you like to sponsor that? And we'll use, your brands and X amount of the cocktails using that technique." And we've been very successful in getting a lot of equipment for our labs. We've just kind of be having that benefit of being able to talk to brands directly.
Mm-hmm. And I think in the States, you could take that idea of innovation in a different way. So there's, of course, the monetary way of support, but there's also innovation in messaging. And I think that the most successful brands that I've seen have kept an active conversation with a lot of the bartenders, and the way that they then market those spirits supports a lot of the messaging that bars are trying to convey. So, that's obviously different per account that you're working with. But even if it's not a physical means of support, brands can still be innovative in the way that they're using and their marketing to support, directions that bartenders would like to see happen.
And I think just in regards to that, going back to what we were saying during the presentation is, I think the best way to actually foster growth and support innovation is truly help people build their culture and put a lot more emphasis on not just a short-term business relationship, but truly put emphasis on the deeper layers of innovation and foster growth through creating cultures.
Mm-hmm. Question, could you talk more about to-go cocktails and any recommendations on those? I think that this is where, we're seeing a lot of the more innovative techniques being used to create a more stable product. I think for to-go, what you're looking at are different challenges than in a bar. So it might not, in a bar, innovation might be, some kind of experience, and to-go, it's sort of how do we create the best quality, that can last, the journey, and then however long to the guest drinks it. So I think all three of our bars were put a lot of great deal of effort into different techniques that created, whether it's clarification, forced carbonation, creating something that lasts. So I think that's an area, even if your bar concept isn't, per se modern, even if you do classic cocktails, there's still innovative techniques that you can use that's really going to help you with that specific genre of to-go cocktails.
And we weren't doing individual size cocktails. That passed in Chicago not too long ago. So bars are definitely doing smaller size drinks to go. You can walk up to a window, take something to go with you. It's sealed completely. Can't be drinking on the streets. But like AK said, we were focusing more on shelf life, making sure that if somebody took something home, they were getting the full value because they could have at it for about a week's worth of time, clear instructions, and then making sure on our end that our labor was making sense for what we were doing, because you can't oftentimes spend many hours on these labor intensive techniques, and you have to find ways to either simplify or I guess bring what you would normally do at your bar to your home user. So we were trying to make things more like, hey, you're the home bartender. Here's some cool stuff to rim your glass with. Here's some cool garnish. Here are some botanicals. Make your own gin and tonic. So we were trying to find ways so that the guests could have an experience at home rather than just crack a bottle open, pour it into a glass, and then go from there. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what we do in our bar here, we wanted to make sure that we could allow them access to something like that at their own home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for us as well, like to go cocktails, I think I agree with Alexis and AK. We're looking for shelf life, trying to incorporate innovative techniques in it. But so even for us talking about shelf life, we developed a kind of, and it's been done before using citric acid, tartaric acid, malic acid, but we made a kind of blend that kind of mimicked both lemon and lime juice, a little bit of gum arabic and salt, a bit of sugar, and just so we could mix it in, and we knew it would have a good shelf life for a month. But also, I guess from a bar owner's point of view as well, we're trying to look for, a bigger cash margin. So as opposed to selling individual cocktails, we're selling them as 2 cocktails in a bottle, or buying it in a larger 500 ml. So, trying to kind of generate as much cash margin through it, because, we had to lower our GP slightly just to make it a bit more attractive, because, we're kind of losing a bit of the, being in a bar, that atmosphere, that theater you get from the amazing bartenders in all our places. So yeah, for me, it was also thinking about the volume we're selling at to get a cash margin to kind of compensate the lower GP.
Mm-hmm. I like how you talk about the shelf life in terms of using different acids or ways to kind of stabilize. And I think that really ties into looking at ways to also then recreate or be flexible by looking at how you can be a little bit more sustainable. So like products that might normally go to waste, looking at how you can actually incorporate those back into a to-go cocktail to then upcycle to make that ingredient better. And as an example, we were using a lot of orange peels for garnishes. We were selling like old fashions and Manhattan kits, and all these oranges are sitting there. So we ended up juicing them and then actually adding, the acids back into them to get them up to an appropriate level. And orange juice is kind of fairly muted and mild and doesn't really do much. So we froze a lot of what we weren't using, and then would put that type of a blend in place of where you might find a lemon or a lime juice. And because it had acid added back into it, not only was it adding flavor and that acid component that you needed, but it also allowed it to then be more shelf stable. And we were using products that we would normally discard in mass. So it was really nice to be able to kind of reuse and look at how we were trying to make sure that our margins were where we needed them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we were actually straying away from a lot of our fresh produce drinks. So looking for different things that you could use, either frozen ingredients or something, because I guess over the summer when it was warmer, people still wanted something refreshing. So then we looked to a lot of carbs, which uses less product. So even if it had a little bit of clarified lime, it's not the same as, juicing a ton of fresh juice and then figuring out how to keep it stable, and with labor and prep and all of that. It was just minimizing those shelf stable products that would normally, not be an issue. I see a question: what's different about what sort of innovations are accepted now during the pandemic as opposed to in normal times? I guess it just depends on, again, what we're talking about with innovation being more of a mindset than being something like a tangible practice. So, in terms of a mindset, it's just that those challenges that you might need to overcome through innovation are obviously going to be much different. now, and innovation, maybe doesn't necessarily have to mean just in drink creation. It could be in business model. I think, as Iain spoke about a lot in the presentation, how they've really turned things around and created a profitable business. So I would say maybe accepted versus necessary. I don't know, now versus normal times.
Okay, I think that's a very important point, as in right now, innovation is truly a means of survival, whereas in normal times, it is something that you could do out of your personal interest or your personal ambition. So it could be more of a natural evolution. And I truly think it very much depends on how people can cope with stress. Um, for example, I'm just reading a very interesting book about the scientific research on people's mindset in regards to stress. And a lot of people would say that if you have a positive approach towards stress, it can actually have a positive and sort of performance enhancing effect. Whereas if you see it negatively, it can deteriorate your performance levels. And I think with innovation in times like these, it can have the very same effect. If you see it as something stressful and negative now, that you actually need to do something in order to survive, it's probably a different take than when you see innovation as something liberating and uplifting and positive to change something for the longer good. And I think the most successful entrepreneurs now will be the ones who fully embrace and welcome the opportunity that's given to them due to the pandemic in order to take their business to the next level and stay relevant, not just during the pandemic, but many, many years after.
What's interesting about all of this too is I think we're looking at innovations as strictly like what this reminds me of is how is the bar and the bar process becoming innovative. But I think what we're also looking at is, styles of service as well. That kind of extends not just from a bar or a back of house or a kitchen, but also extends out into, the dining room where people are interacting with guests. And what's interesting right now is our style of service at the aviary, what was once very like, this is our style, has kind of now transitioned into something a little bit more casual, but still maintaining the standards that we always uphold, in ways where we think about how can we, allow our drinks to sit a little bit longer on ice without losing any integrity or flavor. How can we look at shelf life we talked about? How can we look at bringing the guests multiple things at once where we once used to bring out one thing at a time? And so I think we're looking at innovation, not just in how we make drinks, but also how we service our guests that are coming into our establishments as well. So that questions, I think, like it's very open-ended and it could mean so much, but kind of how, we're trying to do things over here as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the next question, since the onset of the pandemic, have you personally seen your clientele shifting toward the traditional, the tried and true, or do you see an uptick in experimentation and willingness to change previous consumer behaviors? I would say, I think that in general, right now during the pandemic, the majority of guests that I saw, it's not necessarily about wanting something classic versus something more modern, but everyone just wants something sort of easy, and I think that maybe held true beforehand. I mean, the thing that we know is universally true in bars is that we're there to make people happy. And we know with the diversity of bars in the world that, that can mean something very different, but that universal truth is always there, So right now when people are stressed in their house, you kind of you lose that conversation. So if something is on your menu that you might need to like sit and explain to a guest, like maybe what this unique herb is, or, what this flavor profile is going to be like, because it doesn't resonate very well. That might be more difficult now with to-go and more contactless services. But, but I still think that people are looking for that sort of transportive experience in a bar.
Yeah, I mean, we've found, you know, we're getting a lot of regulars coming back because they've obviously been waiting months to come back. But then we've also found, for example, Glasgow, a close city to Edinburgh in Scotland, a lot of their bars aren't open now, so we're finding a slight influx of people coming through from Glasgow to have the bar experience that have different demands and, you know, palates. So we're finding it's a bit more of an all-rounded thing. So we've really had to cater our menu to be a bit more, I guess, tried and tested, as you said, traditional, but still have a good balance of all the innovation stuff we're doing, like switching, etc. as well. But we find most, you know, we still have a lot of people that are frustrated. I think, you know, deep inside we all are, but you know, they're just happy to be in the bars again. So we have a lot of people just actually just happy to be there. So there's not necessarily such a massive change in consumer demands. They're more just like just delighted to choose a drink from the menu that we've got. But we are definitely trying to cater for a bit more of an all-rounded audience now.
I see the same here in Vienna. I mean, TOTC2020 is very much about the guest experience and the hospitality side of things, and less about the super innovative and new beverage program every other day. And a lot of people that come in, most of our regulars, love the fact that they still have the same feeling as always. So it's like a capsule in time almost. They come back to TOTC2020 and it's like nothing ever happened, right? Like there's no pandemic outdoors. And I think that speaks a lot to most people now are looking for something comforting and not challenging, as in things that I don't necessarily know, because there's enough uncertainty in the world out there already. So I think we're seeing more of a yearning and a longing for something that people know and can relate to, where they have a positive feeling towards.
Mm-hmm. I really love the idea that Alexis said, you know, about like creating, you know, I like including different garnishes or botanicals, because to me, when I think of, you know, my experiences at the aviary, it's that it's an immersive experience with your drink. And so I think that, you know, when you look at innovation, it's like, okay, well, take that one word, an immersive experience, you know, just because you can't have that in at the bar, bringing that to your home, it's still keeping true with that experience, even if it looks very different, you know. So I think, you know, whatever works for you, writing sticky notes or putting it up on the wall, like what are words that kind of define the experience that you want to create with your guest, and then, you know, see different ways that you can still uphold those concepts, I guess, or adjectives or whatever you want to put. And then I see, can you speak more on innovation in regards to leadership and defining a culture within your workplace? How do you enable the freedom that allows growth for your staff while maintaining a level of control in standards and ensuring positive habits and techniques?
I'll jump right in on this one. So one of the things that's happened in a lot of bars, I think, is you've been seeing a lot about furloughs and whatnot. And so if you're only doing 25% of your business, sometimes you can't actually maintain the full staff that you once had. And so right now, where we are, we're kind of stretched a little bit thin. You know, managers are, you know, in jobs they're not normally in, not just managing, but also sometimes working in service, like on the bar. Like I haven't worked behind a bar and it's been a long time. And now I am constantly working behind the bar, like actively hands-on, holding tins and stumbling through my old motions again. But what this leaves is a lot of room for teaching people how to not be micromanaged, how to prioritize better, how to work faster while still maintaining standards. We have a lot of positions that don't have managers around to kind of like walk them through stuff. For example, our prep teams work in the morning, basically supervisor free, and they're required to bang out a specific list of things to our standard perfectly every time without somebody there telling them, you know, you're taking too long and stuff like that. And so I think what we're trying to do is make sure that they understand what our standards are, but then also give them the ability to be very confident in their decision-making processes, knowing when something is incorrect, knowing when to ask the question. And then when they do ask the question, hey, is this wrong? Being able to provide an answer because they've thought that thing through. And so they're also learning how to problem solve. And while what we want to do is teach people how to bartend and how to make drinks, this is super important because when they leave to go into other jobs or possibly open their own bars later on, having a set of skills that allows you to problem solve and identify problems and then actually manage yourself and manage other team members ends up being very valuable for them, later on down the road. And so I think that looking at innovation, it's also teaching people how to become their own better managers and how to then lead teams, which I think we talked a little bit about in the seminar as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for us since day one, it's always been about treating people as a person, not a number. We have the benefits, I guess, in our bars here that I am a bartender by trade, so I've understood, the hardships of mentally and physically of what's tasks in being a bartender. So throughout it, even pre-lockdown, we've always paid them a real living wage, which is above, the minimum wage. We give them a profit share, and we micromanage everyone. It's not a carte blanche treatment of everyone. That's not the way to do things. You have to really identify how to get the best out of people and give them projects. If they want projects, you help them with it. And, I think it's a less thing, you're nurturing them. And, it's about, helping them understand the right ethics, treating people as equals, whatever genders, diversity, whatever, everyone has to be treated fairly. And that's very important. And I guess, no one's in our bars forever. And I think a lot of people that manage or own bars get too personally attached to individuals and they feel like a betrayal when they move on. But here we know it's inevitable people are going to move on, and we're always happy for them if they progress. But, we always want to know that we've benefited them in the right way, that at least they can take some of the positive ethos that we've instilled in them onto the next people. And you kind of see it like a tree. We've planted seeds with lots of people that have come through the years of Panda and Sunsuit, the Redeemer, Nauticus, and then they can hopefully pass on these great things. So I think what my dad taught me when I was very young is you have to treat people with respect that you'd like to be treated yourself. So I think that's very important to have those right humane ethos first, and then you slowly nurture them. But be firm and fair. Don't give someone too much free reign on anything. You have to teach them first. Like, do a project with them side by side. Teach them their faults, and then maybe the next project you take more of a step back and kind of give them a bit more leadership and ownership over it.
Yeah, I think just being inclusive and keeping an open dialogue. And some of the best lessons that I ever learned were just by being present in the room while drinks were being balanced or meetings were being had. It's just involving your staff at every step of the way, and then involving yourself. It keeps that connection there, so that you're creating an opportunity to lead by example, and then your staff also feel involved, so that they kind of know what to look forward to, and it just keeps everyone on the same page. I think, and then it's more, we talked about innovation as it must be collaborative, and I think that that's really the way it's got to be.
It's also important to, I think, help your staff set their own goals too. A lot of people don't like to right up front say, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I want, and here's where I want to end up. And some people are as blunt as to be like, hey, one day I want your job. And I think, I've had people like literally walk up and I'm like in their review and I'm like, where do you want to be in a year? And they're like, I want to be in your seat. And so I think it's important to let them kind of speak to their goals and what they're looking for, because if you do something like that, I think then, like AK said, kind of, being in a room while drinks are being balanced or being, a part of meetings, you can also look and figure out where it is important for them to be in those times. Because I like to tell the guys that want to do everything, I'm like, I'd rather have you be really good at a few things right now than mediocre at everything. And so having them set their own goals so that they can have a ladder that they can then start to climb. So every time they accomplish something and you move on to the next thing, they already have a really good foundation below them. So there's not a lot of chance for falling backwards, but rather moving and progressing forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think also as a leader, you have to also be honest with yourself that you're not perfect either, and having regular team meetings and listening to feedback or suggestions, and actually being level-headed enough to actually take on a suggestion that's better than your idea as a leader. You see a lot of places where it's very authoritarian and doesn't matter if someone is right or better. It's my way or nothing. And I think you need to give people a voice in discussions. You don't always have to take it on board. Sometimes as being a leader, you will be right more than them, but also be honest and take on advice. Or if you make a mistake going, actually, you're right. Actually, my idea is not as good, or your idea is better. So I think it's also good to be level-headed and honest about the best decisions for the business.
I think that ties in pretty nicely with the next question that we got, is marrying innovation with intent. Like, why that? And the question was, how should and could that carry over to the menu and bar program for a new bar? For example, a bar like In very clearly used innovation as the backbone of its program. However, overpromising innovation might cause disappointment if it's oversold. The question was, is that a discussion to be had over keeping that openness towards innovation at a new place? Or is it just obvious, perhaps, that person was asking? So I think, in general, if we talk about intent for innovation, there's a couple of shareholders that would sort of profit from the idea of innovation. And that's, as we were talking with culture and the internal aspect, is truly your people, because they can sort of go through their own evolutionary path and learn new skills along the way. There's obviously an external factor where you're trying to innovate for your guest in order to have something new and have a new experience once they come to the bar. But it's also a bigger something when thinking about the industry as a whole, that we're trying to help the entire industry grow and taking things to a new level by some truly thought leading and innovating people that will always help the entire community and the entire industry moving forward. If all these different intents are in place and properly thought through, I think then there is very little room for overpromising or not delivering, because the foundation is always there, because you're doing it out of the right intent. And yes, I would certainly agree that innovation shouldn't be just a means of marketing where you're like, we're the most innovative and that's the only thing we thrive on, right? It's an element of a bar program and of the concept of a bar, if you will, but clearly it must have depth and it must have an intent to it. And then I think the risk of failing on delivering that is actually very little.
I feel like, as a bar and with your staff and as a leader and how you put, we're the gatekeepers of what sort of message we're trying to send out to our guests. I know at PDT and at existing, sometimes with we would get this experience with guests where they would come in and they would say, right, but I don't want that mezcal mule because it's not like weird enough. There was this idea that innovation has to mean weird, or they would be like, I thought that you were an innovative bar, so why don't I see a drink that tastes like dirt? Or like, something. And I think that it was still really important to just communicate to guests that innovation, is looking at different ways that we can do things better and make things more delicious and more consistent. And that's sort of what we would say. And sometimes there would be people that would be disappointed because we didn't have, 100 house-made bitters and, something like that. And so then it's just managing your expectations. Maybe somebody's looking for, something that, but as long as I think that you're presenting a genuine message of this is what we define as innovation, then, you at least have to be proud of what you're putting forward, even if it doesn't hit, 100% of every guest that walks in the door.
And just one thing, because we're getting close to the end of the Q&A session. For all of you guys watching, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. All together or individually, you can always reach out to Iain, Alexis, AK, and myself through our email addresses or our phone numbers. I think we're all here for you to help, and many thanks for everybody who was watching, and of course to all of you for being part of that wonderful panel and that highly interesting conversation about innovation.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm here for you guys. Send messages. I'll answer them happily. So go for it.
Thank you.